Welcome to another episode of Toot Your Own Horn Music Matters. I am here with the one and only Samantha Tranchida today. Hello, Samantha.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I am great, and I am so happy to have you and so excited to hear your story. Where did it all begin for you?
Sure. So, my family is not a musical family. So, when fourth grade band turned up, my parents were supportive and I went and tried out some instruments. So, it boiled down for me because I was excited to join band. I didn't really have a nook that I found yet. I had friends who played sports and I always did sports, but I was fine. But it's like, let's give this a shot. Music was always in our house. My parents just weren't musicians. So after trying instruments, it got down to oboe and violin. I did try the clarinet, but I couldn't make a sound, which was surprising. But they're like, "Oh, well, you can play oboe." And so I ended up choosing oboe, not knowing really the can of worms that I was opening by choosing oboe. Um, but yeah, so starting in fourth grade band, and that's where it all kind of started.
Wow, that's amazing. Double reeds are very hard to make a sound on, so obviously that was a very good fit because that isn't usually the normal response.
Yeah. I guess I wasn't a normal child.
No, I guess not. And so, did you have a great program, a great director? Like, what kept you playing?
Yeah, so I did, yes, where I grew up in the Chicagoland area did have a great music program. In middle school, it was pretty intense. Our director expected a lot of us, and we sounded. I remember thinking like, "Wow, we actually, when you play, our band sounds great. You know what it, that it's music happening." I go see some of my cousins' concerts, and not so much the same case, or not so much the same. And it was great, and I did enjoy it. It was a little intense for me, and where I really started loving performing was in high school. Um, and from the get-go, I made a lot of friends initially in band. It was always a joke because, we did have marching band, and if you were in band, you had to be in the marching band, and being an oboe player was not my favorite thing. I did march oboe one time in middle school, and I it was so hard, and then I ended up teaching myself flute, which is a lot of fun, and that's what I played going in marching band going forward. Um, but, I stuck through marching band so I could get to concert band season. And being an oboe player and being pretty successful in marching or in high school, I was also in orchestra. So I really found a niche there. And, we had such a great program. We always joke because our marching band was great. Despite being a concert band focused school, our marching band was wonderful. And people would go to the high school football games to see the band, not the football team, which was great because, just as a band kid, you're just like, yeah, like we're great. Like, come see us. It's fantastic. And yeah, and I think it all stemmed from a great teacher.
You said your experience was who was your teacher? I'm sorry.
Ross Kellen at Glenbard East High School. Yeah, we can get to it later, but the reason I'm still involved in music and where I am in my career started with him being a great teacher.
That's fantastic, and that was all the way back when you started. Was he oh, no, that was in high school you said, or was
That
that
was in high school. That was high school.
what made it intense in middle school out of curiosity?
Um, it was high expectations, and I think, going in which is great, and I think, especially now having, a daughter of my own, I have high expectations of my daughter, and I think at the time I was just like, "But I just want this to be fun," and not realizing that, yeah, to be fun, but, like, really to be successful, you've gotta put in the work at this. It's not just show up and wing it, not with music, and if you do, like, sure, you can still have fun, but when you put in the work, that's when the experience really kind of blossoms, so
And isn't that the thing about music that I think teaches people something of real value is that it's endless, really. There's no bottom to the work. It never kind of ends. It just keeps going. But that's what makes it exciting to know that you're willing to continue to climb the hill.
right. Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, that's a really great skill to learn at any age, I think, because there's no it's just eternal. It just keeps going.
And it transitions to other parts of your life.
It does.
I think, being a hard worker in music and putting in the work there transitions to how I handle, my now professional life. And I think it taught me skills and it comes into the professional part of your life, but then also when you need a break and you want to like go back to, oh, why do I do this? Oh yeah, it's because I love it. And you can still have that bit of spark in music going forward. I don't need if my knees go bad when I'm 60, I can still pick up my oboe and play. I can still do that. I can still learn a new instrument. So it's never ending.
Yeah. And I think in today's world that is so caught up in, performance and outcomes and resolutions and, like beginnings and endings, I think it's a
Mhm.
beautiful thing to know that this can preserve a long part of your life and also teach you so many different things about yourself and about your skills.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So your high school director, though, it sounds like really cemented the deal. In other words, it's on. You sounded like you might have been a little iffy just because it felt like pressure before, but then high school seemed to lock it in for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny because it did lock in through high school, and I was so involved in, like I said, band and orchestra. A big thing in Illinois is Super State. We'd go to Super State every year, and I'll never forget. Like I can still remember we played La Fiesta Mexicana, and we won. And this was back in 2003. So this is 23 years, but I can still remember that feeling. And musicals and orchestra and multiple, so many concerts a year, and I loved it so much that I quit after high school. I was like, "You know what? I've been so involved in music that I think I need to, like, not do it anymore." And I think within a semester of being, at community college, I was like, "Hmm, I think I made a mistake," because I was like, it was the one thing, everything else, you put the work in and you enjoy it, and I'm like, but the outcome is just like, "Okay, well, I did this." But with music, the outcome was like, "Wow, I'm I'm pretty successful at this," and, like, losing that was just so jarring. So, funny enough, after I realized that, I ended up, going to school to be a music ed major. Well, first of all, just a music major, and I followed my high school director who moved on to the college scene. So, I didn't know much about the college program I was joining, I just knew he was there.
Mhm,
And so I followed him. And I got my degree eventually in music education.
mhm. And what did you do with that degree in music education?
So I was lucky enough. So when I graduated in 2010, the job market was pretty tough, but I was lucky enough. I did land a position. I moved about 2.5, 3 hours south to Decatur, Illinois to teach. And it was a 5 through 12 program. So it was kind of great because I got to start at the high school and co-teach with a former director who was just wonderful down in Decatur. And so I taught with him for the first part of the day, moved down to the middle school, did my middle school band, and then I taught beginners. So it was really great to like see that flow and growth of students and have an impact on kids all the way from 5 to 12. But not drowning, because
Mhm,
it was just a piece of every school. So that was great. And I did that for 2 years, and I really did enjoy it. It was far from home. All my family is up and down North Avenue outside of Chicago, so it was just too far from home, and when I moved back, it was a real struggle to find a teaching job in 2012. Um, so I worked some odds and ends jobs, and then I actually ended up working for a music company, local to Chicago, and I found my way back to music still.
mhm. And how did that job appear? Meaning, what was the hook there? Or what helped you make that decision?
Yeah, sure. So after I couldn't find a teaching job, like I said, I was doing odds and ends jobs like dog grooming. I worked in a grocery store, because I needed a living and I couldn't be a teacher at the moment. And I had made a connection with the school service rep at my local, from a teaching job that I had part-time up here. And a couple years after we made that connection, he was like, "Hey, Sam, we've got a job here, are you interested?" And I was like, "Huh." Like, "Yes." I'm like, but I had no idea what this side of the industry was.
Mhm.
Being a music ed major, I really didn't have a big connection to the product side or the school service side or what kind of resources could and are provided to teachers. So it was a whole new side of the curtain that I had never been aware of. And that's kind of how I found myself in a customer service role. And I was at that company for 12 years. So it was a
Wow.
great experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think for someone listening to this who may or may not, for various reasons, want to remain in a music education role but has a strong music education background? What could you parlay about industry to help them better understand how they might be able to be involved?
Sure. Well, I think a big thing is, like let's say, you're passionate about law. You love music, but you're passionate about law and you'd like to be a lawyer to serve. Um, Guess what? We still need lawyers in the music industry. If you want to be a doctor, great. Go be a doctor, and be an audiologist and hearing. Guess what? We need those people in the music industry. So I think no matter what career path you're interested in pursuing, it can be and is already connected to the music industry. Those career options are there. It's not just performance, it's not just teaching, which are incredible. I we need good teachers and good teachers are so incredibly valuable. Obviously, I speak so highly of the educators that have been involved in my life. But there's opportunity out there and you can keep playing in college. You don't have to stop. Please don't stop because there's a reason that we all have this profound connection to music. And you know, don't stop. There's a niche for you in our industry. So please pursue it.
It's one of the most challenging things about our industry, which is why I like to have you, is because your story is so familiar in that you didn't know. You would like, what other jobs? What else can I do here, right? And industry has sort of been like a secret in some ways. We as industry participants help finance a lot of things that educators and performers are involved in, but a lot of times I don't think there's enough clarity around what roles are available and what is possible. Not necessarily just always for the manufacturer, but whether it be for a dealer or whether it be working in repair or there's so many opportunities. And without the manufacturer and the brand and repair, we wouldn't have instruments to play.
Right. And Lisa, one of my favorite things is, being involved in this industry still and working with tons of musicians. Like so many people have a journey similar to mine or, unique on their own. But I love it when there are people outside of our industry that find themselves in the music industry and they're like, oh my gosh, like these people are great. This is a wonderful industry that's, at its core supporting wonderful initiatives for students and, humans. And I just love the response of hearing from those people when they find themselves in our industry. It's one of my favorite things connecting with those people. 'Cause they're just like, "Oh my gosh, this is so fun." I'm like, "Yeah, you could play an instrument still.
Yeah.
What do you want to play?" You know?
Yeah. I mean, music is all at its fundamental about connection, right?
Right.
So, no doubt about it. So what made you now, obviously, being closer to home because you're close to your family mattered, so I really get how you wanted to be closer to home. What about the job? Talking about industry, what in this role in customer service did you do that was so incredible to keep you for 12 years? That's a really long tenure. That was love. You really enjoyed that position.
I did. I think a lot of it was the opportunity for growth in my position. I started in one position and then I moved to even further behind the curtain working in, fulfillment and inventory management, learning about, how a business works. And I was also given opportunities to support the industry in education, like support education. So I was given the opportunity to go to DC to advocate for music education and, go to NAM to go to sessions and just learn about our industry and, that complete circle. It starts with a student, who rents an instrument and, we people make the instrument and then it just keeps going back and forth again. So just learning that how our industry works and flows really kept me there. And I wanted to still be involved and close to music and working with musicians, and the people too. I worked with some wonderful people, and who I maintain relationships with still today because, those interpersonal connections that you make, you know, that's what makes you. And I think as musicians, we really need that support. And people who have that common thread with us are the people that we really lean into.
Yeah. And in that role, it seems like you got to use all your skills, which is kind of exciting because you are a performer or a player and you were an educator. And then you built on that to use some of your communication skills because it seems like clearly you have always been a communicator.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true, and it was so fun because I when I realized that, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, my degree wasn't for nothing." Like, I know what score order is, I know, if someone calls and they're looking for a part or, you know talking to a customer and helping them choose gear, and things like that. You can help people because of your background, and, the fun thing about working in a retail space, I think, especially when it involves students is and knowing as a parent now how I feel about my daughter, but, they wanna come in they want to do what's best for their student. Like, they're there for love of their student. They might not know the top from the bottom of a clarinet or, what you hit a drum with. They want their student to succeed in music, and they see the value in it, and being able to talk to parents about that was super special to make those connections. And then, having experience in the industry, they trust you. They're like, "Oh, okay, I might not know, but you know what? She sure I get it. I get it." And that was, I think, really special too.
Mhm. So, what pulled you out of that role that you love so much?
Yeah, so it was like I said, I loved it. The great part of my new role being on the manufacturing side is that I still get to work with, my former employer is now my customer. So that was definitely helpful. But it was really kind of a new adventure, being on the manufacturing side and having a broader reach to get hands in the instruments or to get instruments in the hands of more students in my territory. So it was kind of natural because it was really just kind of the next layer um of supporting music.
Mhm. And so, what does your day look like now? What do you do?
Yeah. So I work for an instrument manufacturer and I am a district sales manager. So I get to talk to dealers, get the best products in the industry into their hands and then into the hands of students. So we make, all band instruments, accessories and yeah, so that's what I do. And so much of my job, technically it's a sales role, but sales to me is really all about relationship building. So I'm a communicator, I'm a problem solver, and, it's my job to find creative ways to get the best instruments that we have into people's hands.
Mhm. What skills do you think you have when you think of, like, educators and you think of people who are performers or private lesson teachers? What's the difference in terms of how they spend their day versus yours? And what skills do you think you have to, either wanna develop or have coming into a role like yours?
Well, my role, see, it's very different. So I used to be, I'll call it like a 9 to 5. It was very 9 to 5. I started work in the morning, I worked throughout the day. I left home and I went to work and I worked my shift and then I came home. In my new role, I work remote. So I'm at home. So a big learning curve for me has been how to maintain that work life. I don't want to say balance because I don't think there really is a work life balance. It's really figuring out how your your job and your career fits in with your life. And because they can't fight. You try and draw a line in the sand and it's really tricky in this role. You can. You have to be flexible. And I think embracing that flexibility, if my daughter's sick and I have to go pick her up, I can be flexible with that. But then, I might need to put in a little bit of work later. Um and that's okay. And I appreciate and I love that flexibility. And I don't think I can go back to, in a regular 8-hour day because I just, learning how to fit how to have my career and my home life kind of meld together has been, um, really great.
Mhm. And what was it in looking back, what was it that made you not take the traditional route? Like you started the education route, but then you took a detour and got into industry. Is there anything else that you could tell our listeners that might have caused you to realize that the traditional performance or education route wasn't exactly the right fit, although you wanted to use all those skills?
Yeah. So I think for me as an educator, I was successful at it and I did enjoy it. Um, but for me, it took a lot of energy. And I think when you think about, how you're going to spend your time, it really it took so much energy from me. Like this is a much more natural fit to my personality, to my lifestyle, to, balancing home and work. So I think that's really why I gravitated towards this side. It took a lot out of me to be in education. And then honestly, I might still be teaching if there were more jobs at the time. But it was really tough to apply for 10 jobs and not hear anything. And that was just it was a product of the times, right? There were 200 applicants plus for every job in the Chicagoland area. It was crazy. And there's only so many jobs out there. So I think, looking back, it was kind of discouraging. But which is a shame because I was passionate. You're young, you're out of college, and you want to change the world. You've been drinking the Kool-Aid, which is good Kool-Aid, like music matters and music is the universal language. I want to share this with kids. I want to have a great band and I want everyone to have a wonderful time and have the same amazing experience that I did in music. And just to not have that opportunity to go and do it because there's one band director per school was just, oh, it was tough. And I think that's why I walked away for a little while just because it was a tough pill to swallow. Like, oh, I did all this and I went this far and now I just can't cross the finish line. But I think where I landed is just I'm so happy with it.
And did you have a relationship with the dealer that you got that job? Well, you did. You had a relationship
Mhm.
through
Yeah.
your ability to connect, that you were able to find that job.
If I hadn't given him my resume, I don't know. I wasn't actively applying for jobs in the music industry because again, I didn't know it existed. This huge industry, this like mecca, this company that I work for is incredible and just does it so much work and serves so many schools. And they were right under my nose and I didn't even know. There was just someone who came to the school and, like, helped us, in tough situations, with emergency repairs or need a box of reeds, it was just this incredible thing I didn't even know existed.
Do you have any insight? Because I very much agree with you that it's not very well known and it's people really don't get it. But because you've been on both sides of that, you've kind of been in both places. Do you have any insight as to why it is so hidden?
I don't know, and I think something I don't know, and I think some people, dealers who have good relationships with secondary education, like, who have relationships with colleges and universities. Then I think those educators know what's going on, but I think I just in my college education, like, I was prepared for a lot of the teaching, sure, but even, like, administration and, like, dealing with everything that's not education, I felt pretty well prepared for. I didn't feel like anything came out of the blue when I was teaching, but I didn't have a course on working with a music,
Right.
a school service person. I didn't know. Um, so I think, yeah, just having that connection at the college level with music educators is super important. And I know some people do that. So I think some, you know, educators who are out of college do know about that. I will say that if you are going into education, try and work at a music store
Right.
and learn because you'll learn about so many products and about where your stuff come from that I think could be so valuable, and having worked on the dealer side, oh my gosh, if teachers had worked there, I'm like, "Oh, that would be such a great thing for us to have that connection,"
Mhm.
you know? I
Yeah,
had rulers.
I found when we did a lot of rentals, how many teachers did not understand who were in charge of, like, choosing or working with a music store, how much investment and how much prep goes into an advance of a recruitment night, or how and they don't realize the money involved, or, "Oh, I just wanna go to with my new I'm new in the job, I wanna go with my new company," and it's like, "Oh, wait a minute, X all this money was laid out for you and all," they just don't know very much at all about the financial investment, the amount of preparation that has to go into try to support a school, or, just kind of the industry and business part of it that's very important to service and protect them in terms of the development of their own programs.
Yeah. Well, and how much work their school service reps do to support them.
Right.
They're working super hard. They've got just an incredible workload, working with multiple teachers in different schools and the different needs of each school and trying, they want to get teachers what they need when they need it and make sure that they're supporting, their band and orchestra programs. And they work so hard to do that. And to know that that support is there, teachers that really lean into that support for recruiting, for example,
Mhm.
you can ask your school service rep, hey, I've got this event coming up. I'd love it if you can support me. Cause guess what? A lot of these, teachers, they'll do this once a year.
Right.
These reps are doing it you know, 50 plus, 100 plus times
Right.
a year. Yeah, they know what they're doing. They know how to get, recruitment and retention, like they're very familiar with it.
Mhm.
So really leaning into, the experts. They know what they're doing and use them.
Yeah, and building a partnerships, with not only the rep, but with the whole store, because so many people inside those stores have expertise in different instruments, because just like you, they come out of usually out of a playing background or an
Yeah, right.
route, and they have a whole set of other skills, and in starting to look as that dealer as a resource to supplement what you may or may not have in your district or within your immediate team, I think is very valuable, and not just seeing them as a vehicle for choosing who you're gonna buy something from, right? And
Right.
not that it's not important to make a buying decision, but it's very important to realize that it's a team effort to get, students to stay involved in programs and to make sure that you know what the best products are and best services. Because a lot of times I think educators, who don't have a skill in a certain area will ask a friend or maybe ask a professional, which who may or may not have the kind of product knowledge that may or may not serve the population of students that you're working with, and it's incredibly important that there's a fit, and usually a music store might be more closely aligned with that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, something like a clarinet mouthpiece, right? If you tell every student to go get an M13 lyre, that might not be the best fit for that student. Sure, it's a wonderful mouthpiece, 5 RV lyre, that one too, they're wonderful. But, if you have someone at a store, like go talk to Lisa. Lisa is going to be able to find you, the best mouthpiece to fit your needs as a player, and to have a contact for something like that, or brass mouthpieces, go talk to Sam. She can help you find, your next trumpet mouthpiece that's really going to help elevate your playing and push you as a performer.
Yeah. And building that ecosystem, I think, is a really exciting thing in our industry, and to be a connector to do that, I think is a really exciting role to have, because it's so needed to help our industry have more connection to it as a whole. So it's great to see that you have that sort of broad experience to bring to the craft. That's really great.
Kind of crazy how it all added up, I'll tell you. If you would have asked me a decade ago, I mean, or even, 5 years ago, where things would, one thing leads to another, and without talking to people and connecting with others, it doesn't happen.
Mhm. Well, I really hope that this role is a role that you're in for an extremely long period of time, and that it just brings continued joy to you. If someone was listening to this podcast and said, "I just can't imagine my life without music," or "I would love to have more music in my life," what would you tell them to choose to try to play a wind instrument right now?
Ooh, I mean, it's something that never leaves your life. And the fun thing about picking an instrument too, like you pick one that doesn't have to be the last instrument you ever play. It's so fun. Like just get involved in music. Whether it's, oboe, flute, clarinet, I love playing oboe, but I decided this year, you know what? I love playing my oboe, but I really wanna play saxophone more, so because, it's I can put it together and it's fun, and because of, my knowledge in music and my knowing how things work, I can do that. I just have to put the work in to do it. And so you can change the color of what you're playing anytime you want. And I think that's so exciting. Um, but just do it. Just do it.
And make sure you find somebody who knows what they're talking about and someone who will follow through. Maybe you go to a pet ed store and see if they'll let you show you a few instruments. Doesn't matter if you're 10 or 80, doesn't matter. Just go and give it a whirl and see who's in your community who could be of support to you.
Right. Right. And just remember we all know music makes us smarter, but I think, something both of you and I read recently, it makes us human. So connecting that way, gosh, there's so incredible technology things happening right now. Um, but music to a certain extent, you know what? It connects us that way. We don't have to speak the same language, but we could play together right now.
100%. And you can express yourself in any way, and no one ever has to hear what you're thinking or saying because it's just coming out through sound.
Perfect. I've never thought of it that way. I love that.
It's a beautiful way to express.
Yeah.